Good evening and welcome into the debut episode of the Toasted Tavern right here on the Fuel Sports Network. I'm Michael Wagenknecht, joined alongside by my co-host Scott Tobben for an hour of just great sports talk across the area. We're going to get to a lot of stuff tonight, including the Cardinals, the Royals, the Battlehawks, and so much more. But because it's our debut episode, we got to take a few minutes and kind of just tell you about ourselves, what we are all about, what we have done, and why we're a part of this brand new, incredible sports network. I'll introduce Scott first, let him talk a little bit about himself. But Scott, introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little bit about, where you came from and what we've been doing.
Yeah, like you said, Scott Tobin. We've been doing different versions of this show for like 3.5, almost 4 years now. We've done a lot of sports, talked a lot of Midwest sports for the last few years on different versions of this show. Interviewed a lot of people, met a lot of people, made some field trips, done some exciting stuff. Besides that, I also work for the St. Louis Cardinals. I also call some high school sports, do some things like that. So multi-talented, move around, do all kinds of stuff, as do you. But our big thing is, like I said, we've been doing a version of this show for almost 4 years now. So we're veterans, right?
That we are. We are definitely veterans, and we have talked with a lot of people in the sports industry, from broadcasters to athletes to just a whole host of other people. And one of the people that has been on our show so much has been KMOX's Tom Ackerman. And when we started this back in the day, back before COVID, actually, he thought we were one of the first that were doing things like this. So we like to think of ourselves as some pioneers in this streaming industry.
Yeah. We started out in the studio, but like you said, as COVID moved in, we kind of moved to this format, and it's worked really well for us, and we're still doing it. So I guess we've done something right, and we keep bouncing around. So somebody likes us, somebody appreciates what we do, obviously.
That they do. Well, for myself, I'm Michael Wagenknecht. I am a broadcaster by trade, in a sense. I do a lot of play-by-play work for colleges, high schools, and for the Ohio Valley Conference as well. I've done some track and field, and I've done some beach volleyball as well. I work at Lindenwood University in the production department. Everything you see going on ESPN Plus for Lindenwood Sports, I'm one of the guys behind that, making it happen. So it's a really, really cool thing to be able to do. And as you said, we've been talking sports for a good 4 years. We talked sports well before that, before we got the show going. But sports is kind of ingrained in both of our lives. I've played hockey. I still play hockey. I still play a whole bunch of sports. So it's just what we do. And we're Midwestern boys at heart, and that's one of the things that we try to do with this show is try to put that spotlight on the Midwest, because you've got that East Coast bias, you got that West Coast bias. A lot of this area is flyover country, and even with some great teams and a host of different sports, it seems to get lost a little bit. And that's kind of what we want to do, is bring that spotlight to the Midwest and really highlight the teams and the athletes that are doing what they do right here in the Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our main goal. We also talk national sports, obviously. We cover all the NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA, everything. But yeah, our focus is, like you said, the Midwest. We're St. Louis kids, and so that's kind of where our heart is. But yeah, we hit everything. So, and we travel around. And like you said, we both played sports. I played baseball and football and basketball, and growing up, and it's just a passion of ours. And we started out doing this. We've been doing this for 4 years, but we go all the way back. Gosh, what, Broadcast Center almost a decade ago now, and then and then doing news radio in Southeast Missouri, and at sister stations working together early in the morning. And so we've transitioned to this now. So some people have been stuck listening to us for, we've been working together for 9 years almost, I guess.
Wow.
8 years.
Wow. Who would have thought a 4 a.m. email chain about news would have turned into what we have going on right now? But I wouldn't trade it for the world. And you know what? We're done talking about ourselves, because you want to hear what you want to hear, which is about sports. And we're going to start right off the bat with the Cardinals, because they're actually in action right now. They're wrapping up their series against the Phillies. And honestly, we thought it was going to go sideways pretty quickly. But after Nolan Gorman smashed a 2-run home run in the first, Phillies tied it up in the bottom half of the second inning. And now Alec Burleson just hit a 2-run home run to reestablish that Cardinal lead. It's now 4-2. But before we get into what's actually happening on the field right now, we got to talk about what's kind of happened over the last couple of weeks. This team was kind of left for dead in a sense. And I know that's a tough thing to say early on in the season because there are so many games in a Major League Baseball season, obviously. But this team with the offense, the defense, the pitching, everybody was kind of questioning things. They were left for dead when they were down in last place. But over the last 2 weeks, they've really, really made a big-time push. They went 8-2 over the last 10 games coming into this series against Philadelphia and vaulted themselves up into second place, 500, 27-27 coming into the series. Now, obviously, they've dropped back down to under 500 after 2 losses to Philadelphia, but still sitting there tied for second with the Chicago Cubs. Watching this team, it's hard to fathom that they would have been able to make a run like this. But, you being at the ballpark, getting a chance to see it, interacting with some of the players and some of the personnel there, what have you seen over the last couple of weeks that kind of makes you feel positive going forward about what this team potentially could do this year?
Well, the offense woke up, which is, in April and early May, nobody was hitting. Paul Goldschmidt was hitting under 200. Nolan Arenado really not doing anything. And when you look at what really fired this team up, what really got them going is that those two guys started to hit. Paul Goldschmidt started that last game in the Milwaukee series about 3 weeks ago from today now. He hit a home run, had a couple of RBIs in that game, and they won that game after losing the first 3 in Milwaukee, and really dropping into last place and looking like, the season could be almost over. I mean, there was some talk that, Ali Marmol could be on his way out the door. As they headed to Anaheim, there were real questions about whether there were changes coming, and they won that last game. Marmol got ejected in that last game in Milwaukee. It seemed to fire up this offense. They went into Anaheim, took 2 out of 3, and everybody said, okay, you beat the Angels, but now you're coming home and you got to play the Red Sox, the Orioles, and the Cubs. And a lot of people were like, oh, they might win 1 or 2 games in this series. They came home and went 7-1. One of those games got rained out, but they have a 7-1 homestand. They sweep the Orioles. They sweep the Cubs. It was a shortened 2-game series, and they take 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox, and the offense woke up. It was like once Goldie started hitting, it's like everybody else relaxed and realized they didn't have to do everything. Everybody kind of settled into a role. Brendan Donovan got hot. Nolan Gorman started hitting for power again. Alec Burleson started to hit. You had Lars Nootbaar that was hot at the time. Mason Wynn got hot. Unfortunately, as we saw going into this Philadelphia series, Nootbaar is on the disabled list again, which was a big blow. And you haven't had Brendan Donovan for this series in Philadelphia. They haven't put him on the disabled list, but he's got a neck strain and has not played these 3 games. So you've been in this series against Philadelphia kind of shorthanded with 2 guys who had been really clutch in this winning streak not there. But we're seeing guys step up again. Alec Burleson, like you said, he just hit a 2-run homer. Before that stretch, after having an 11-game hit streak in Cincinnati in that second game, he'd gone 1 for his last 22 before he hit that home run tonight. So that's a good sign. Nolan Gorman hit his 11th home run, his 7th home run since May 1st. So you're starting to see him come back. And, guys, like I said, guys are just relaxing. You're getting clutch hits. You're hitting with runners in scoring position. And like we said in April, if this team ever starts to hit, they could be dangerous. And we're starting to see that now.
That we are. And the crazy thing is we're seeing that, and you're getting very little production from 2 of the 3 outfield spots, partially because, Nootbaar is injured. Donovan has been out the last couple of days. You've got Dylan Carlson, who's hitting 146, no extra base hits this year. You got Michael Ciani, who's great defensively. Don't get me wrong. What he's been able to do in the outfield, especially in center, to really kind of settle things down defensively. He is a huge asset in the outfield, but hitting just 210, 7 walks, 31 strikeouts. So you've essentially sacrificed 2 spots in your lineup, and yet you're still seeing some offensive production that's been able to win you some games. And yes, going into the series against Philadelphia, you're like, oh, I mean, what are you expecting? You're on a bit of a hot streak, obviously, but you're going up against one of the best teams in the National League East, if not the National League. And we saw it in the first 2 games, just a little bit of a struggle to get things going. You've had defensive issues. Mason Wynn has committed a couple of errors as well. So you get into these kind of scenarios where you have a really good streak, and then all of a sudden it backtracks a little bit. But if you can salvage a win here on Sunday night and go into the new week having at least won a game against Philadelphia, I think you're still feeling pretty good, because overall the last 15 games, you're well over 500. You're right into that NL Central race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the Phillies aren't just one of the best teams in the National League. They might be the best team in baseball. I mean, they're 41-19 right now. I mean, they're just absolutely rolling. They've only lost 8 games at home. They're really tough to beat in Philadelphia, and they're tough. They've got the best pitching staff in baseball, starters and bullpen wise, ERA wise, and their offense is just killer. So they've really definitely are a tough team to beat. And if you can win this one and survive and head to Houston on Monday, you'll feel pretty good about it. You'll be 3-3 because you took 2 out of 3 from Cincinnati and you head on to Houston, which is really struggled and kind of been a surprise this year how much the Astros have struggled. And you're going to be 7 games out because Milwaukee won again. Milwaukee's won 5 in a row, and Milwaukee's feasted the last week because they took 3 out of 4 from the Cubs and then they just swept the White Sox. So, Milwaukee's beat up on Chicago, but Milwaukee has to go to Philadelphia starting tomorrow. So you go to Houston and play well, and hopefully the Phillies take care of the Brewers, and maybe you can gain a game or two and get right back to 4 or 5 games out by the time you head home to play Colorado over the weekend next weekend.
Well, that's the thing. They can't be looking at what Milwaukee's doing as well. They just got to go out and take care of the business that they can take care of. And I feel like that's what they have done the last couple of weeks. And you look at the pitching, that was something that was much maligned going into this season. Everybody was questioning the 3 moves that they made, bringing back Lance Lynn, bringing in Kyle Gibson. And I wouldn't say they were questioning the Sonny Gray acquisition, but, he's kind of got lumped into that 3-headed monster of who they signed in the offseason. But I mean, you look at the numbers, and it's probably better than you expected to see coming in. I mean, Gray exactly as advertised, 7-3, 3.00 ERA, 15 walks to 77 strikeouts. He struck out double-digit guys last night against Philadelphia and taking a loss. He's given up 6 home runs, but, you can live with that. You look at Lynn, he's, 2-3 with a 3.45 ERA. Gibson, 4-2 after that disastrous first start. Everybody was questioning what he was actually going to do in this rotation, but he's giving you innings, and he's giving you really good innings as well. He's given up 8 home runs on the year. It's not bad. I mean, this team has done a pretty decent job, I believe, of keeping the ball in the ballpark against opponents. On the flip side, though, you look at what Miles Michaelis has done this year. He has been the guy that has stuck out as the one that struggled the most this year. Despite 50 strikeouts to 14 walks, he hasn't pitched terribly, but his ERA is at 5.54. He's kind of been the liability in this rotation, and it's the guy that the Cardinals were really kind of looking at as being not the ace, but the guy that settled things down.
It's just kind of a continuation for Miles of what happened to him last year, just really inconsistent. It seems like one good start, one bad start. The weird thing about this year for Miles is it's the second time through the order that's just absolutely killed him. I mean, opponents are hitting like 560 the second time in the order, and then he settles down again the third or fourth time he faces a lineup. But it seems like he'll go first 3 innings really good, and then that 4th or 5th inning he gives up a bunch of runs, and that's kind of been the bugaboo for him. And the home run ball has really hurt him this year too. He's given up a ton of home runs, big home runs. So if you can get that straightened out, then we'll see what happens. And then your 5th spot in the rotation, Steven Matz with the back injuries, doesn't sound like he's going to be back anytime soon. You're kind of patchworking that 5th spot together, although Andre Palante came up and did really, really well the other day in Cincinnati. So we'll see how he does. In Houston, maybe he can hold that down again until, Matz gets back, or, we're into June. You start thinking about the trade deadline being just about 6 weeks away now, 7 weeks away, I guess. So, we'll see what the Cardinals do. It's going to be interesting as you start to make a run towards the middle of the summer here and see exactly where you're at as you start to look towards that trade deadline.
Well, if you can get a guy that maybe slots into that 2nd or 3rd spot, you can readjust your rotation as well. You can slide a guy like a Michaelis down into that 4th or 5th spot, and maybe that actually helps him out. So it is very interesting to see what they're going to do at the deadline. Another piece that has been very, very good for this team has been that bullpen as well. You look at Romero, Kittredge, and Helsley. They've been great. They've really shortened the game down. They've allowed your starters to only have to go 5, maybe 6, and you feel okay about that. In other seasons, a starter goes 5 and you go, oh, crap, this is not going to go well. But you got 3 guys that have kind of shortened this game for the Cardinals. The only problem is they're going to get worn out very, very soon. Middleton is a guy that may not be coming into this bullpen at all this year. A lot of injury setbacks for him. And then you got Palante who moved into that starter's role. So looking at that, what are they going to have to find in order to relieve their relievers at the end of the bullpen?
Well, and they've got some other guys that have kind of stepped up too. You got to look at a guy like Ryan Fernandez and John King, who have really stepped up and have been much better, in those fifth, sixth, seventh inning situations. And a guy who could really be an X factor. He started out really well in the bullpen, then you stuck him in the rotation, and he struggled a little bit. But then he goes back to the bullpen, and he's looked dominant again since he's gone back to the bullpen. Is Matthew Liberatore. Liberatore could be a real weapon now in the bullpen because he could go out there for an inning or 2 innings and just let it fly, and his velocity goes up. It seems like his velocity jumps from 92 or 93 as a starter to 96 or 97 and out of that bullpen. Plus, his slider and his changeup both seem to be more effective when he's coming out of the bullpen. So he's been a real weapon. You looked at him yesterday, and he struck out. Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto and Kyle Schwarber 1, 2, 3 in a row. On like 10 pitches yesterday, and made him look silly. I mean, that slider was just nasty. So, Matthew Liberatore could be a real weapon in that bullpen as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of questions that were being asked at the start of the season have somewhat been answered so far through the first quarter of the season. And honestly, with the Cardinals sitting right now 2 games under 500, I think a lot of people are surprised at the spot that they're in right now. And they've got a chance to get back to within a game of 500 if they're able to hold on to this game against the Phillies. It's still early. Top 4-4-2 Cardinals lead a Gorman 2-run home run and a Burleson 2-run home run is the difference right now in this one. But we're going to talk a little bit here in a second about another team in the state of Missouri that has been almost as big of a surprise as the Cardinals. We'll tell you a little bit more about that right after a message from our sponsors. All right, the Kansas City Royals. Who would have thought that they would be sitting in second place in one of the Central divisions at this point? Not only that, sitting at 36-25, just 4 games back of the Cleveland Guardians. This team was slated for a rebuild, even though they have guys like Bobby Witt and Salvador Perez that are star players. This is a team that no one expected to do much, and yet here they are, one of the best teams in the American League right now. And you look at it, and it's all about speed, and it's all about pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. And you nailed it right there. Bobby Witt is turning into the superstar that everybody predicted him to be a couple of years ago. And Salvador Perez has bounced back. After a couple of down years, he's bounced back. And both of those guys right now have to be at the forefront or in the top of the running for AL MVP because they're both having monster years. Some of their other young players have come along a little bit faster than they expected. And then they went out and they signed some guys to bring some stability to their rotation. Michael Wagenknecht pitched pretty well for them. A couple other guys have stepped up. Their bullpen has steadied things out, and they're playing really well. I think everybody knew that in the next couple of years the Royals were going to make some noise. I think they've just kind of jumped the timeline a little bit faster than anybody really expected. But they're right there knocking on the door. And you look at the top of the AL Central, and I think Cleveland's really surprised people with what they've done, and Minnesota's been tough. So you've got 3 teams right there, and the Tigers have been decent. So I think the Central and the AL has been better, kind of like the National League, than a lot of people expected.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And you talk about this team kind of being a little bit ahead of schedule. It seems like every year, in not just baseball, but almost in every sport, there's always a team that has that moniker of, okay, this is a team to watch out for in a couple of years that all of a sudden just kind of blows up, and they're right there. If they make the playoffs, which is a potential, this is one of those teams, and for those of you that have never gotten a chance to watch our show, my old adage is, these young teams have to learn how to lose in order to win. And that's exactly what I think that the Royals may be in store for this year, to where, if they get into the playoffs, maybe they make a bit of a run, but they're going to find real quickly what it means to win in this environment. But you have guys like a Michael Wacha, like a Salvador Perez that have been there before that maybe can help lead this team a little bit deeper than most people expect them to be. And I think that's why they're in the spot that they're in right now. And, we talk about Perez and Witt, but you also have to look at what, Freddie Fermin, Nelson Velasquez, and Vinny Pasquantino have done for this team as well, helping in the offense. And then we talk about speed. Witt's tied for 4th in the league with 17 stolen bases. Him, Garcia, and Blanco all have double-digit steals. It's kind of like you got a little bit of whitey ball going over on the west side of the state.
Well, and if you remember, that's how the Royals won in 14 and 15 when they made their World Series runs. You know, they had a lot of speed on those teams, stole a ton of bases. A lot of people won't remember that, but if anybody remembers the wild card game against Oakland and John Lester way back when they were down 7-1, and they ended up stealing like 8 bases in the last 3 innings of that game and came back and won. And it kind of sparked that run in 14 that got them there, and then 15 to win the World Series. So that's kind of what the Royals are built around. And when the Royals have had success, those teams, you go back to the Royals of the 80s and 70s, go back to the 70s when Whitey was there. That was one of the key things that was a big part of their success, just like the old Cardinal teams, was team speed. And so they're kind of living with that speed and defense and pitching. And they're making a real run, and it's good for Royals fans because those fans have suffered. They had the 14 and 15 run, but there's been some really lean years in Kansas City if you're a Royals fan.
Well, I love the fact that not just the Royals, but you see it with the Cardinals as well. I love the fact that speed has re-entered the picture. The stolen base has become part of baseball once again. And yeah, part of that's because of the rules of throwing over and all of that, but it's still something that's being cultivated to be a weapon in the leagues. And that's with the fact that both leagues now have the DH. So it's not even so much a matter of playing that small National League ball of bunting guys over, but we're seeing it here, even with the designated hitter in both the American and National Leagues. It's kind of refreshing to see old style baseball happening in this new age. And yeah, maybe you look at it and you go, okay, maybe something as far as statistics have entered into the picture to reinvigorate that mindset. But even if that's the case, teams are doing it, and it's exciting to see, and it's actually made baseball, in my mind, a little bit more palatable to watch after the last couple of years.
Well, yeah, and you almost have to have team speed right now because you look at the hitting stats in baseball right now, and the average around the league is like 240, which is the lowest it's been since 1968, which was the year they lowered the mound or 69, I should say, after Bob Gibson's unbelievable 68, Sandy Koufax and those guys. So teams are just not hitting. Pitching's become so dominant that you have to find ways to create runs and score runs. And so people are starting to realize that, hey, we can use speed, we can use small ball, and you don't have to always depend on the home run to create runs. And like you said, it makes baseball more exciting because there's more action. Everybody's not just standing around waiting for the 3-run homer right now, which, is something that baseball's needed because it had gotten way too reliant on that the last few years.
That it has. Now, we talk about the speed, we talk about the hitting of this Royals team, and we also have to talk about the pitching. I think that's another piece that has kind of gone under the radar. You look at Seth Lugo leading the league with 9 wins. He's second with a 1.72 ERA and 10 quality starts. Cole Reagan's tied for 4th in the league with 89 strikeouts. So, they're getting it done on both sides of the plate in a sense. They're getting the offense, they're getting the pitching, the defense has been there as well. Looking at the names that are a part of this Royals rotation, it's a big time surprise as to why they're there at this point.
Yeah, but Lugo, we talk about Walker. Lugo, another guy who knows how to win, has bounced around and played on some postseason teams and has that experience that can come in there and kind of help solidify things. And that definitely helps, and it creates some stability for a team that has really struggled with their pitching staff the last few years.
Well, as Kevin punched in there. Interesting to see players chasing these new records. Derek with Fuel Sports Network. Baseball needs smarter base running. It's been grossly neglected the last 2 decades. 100% it has been neglected over the last 10, 20 years. But now you're starting to see a lot of speed out there, and it's been refreshing to see. And it also helps that, you've got 2 of the faster teams in the league in your own home states.
Yeah, it does. It does. And, you're seeing a lot of exciting players with that speed. You look at Eladella Cruz in Cincinnati. There's players all over the place that are coming along that have that speed. Bobby Witt, like we talked about. There's just guys everywhere that can fly. And that's something that we haven't seen in a long time. So it is really exciting and refreshing to see these young players come up and have that part of their game, which was sorely missed the last decade or so in the game.
And jumping back to your comment about Lugo as well. Yeah, it's another pitcher in that rotation that has that postseason experience, which is something you need. I mean, you need that in your locker room, especially with a bunch of the young guys that they have on this Royals team. It's nice to have that because I think what gets lost in a lot of people's minds with pitchers is that they're out there every 5th day. and that's when they make an impact on the game. Well, yes, they make an impact on the game when they're pitching, for sure. But the other 4 days that they're not pitching, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see that really help this team. And you get a chance to kind of see that a little bit with what you get to do with the Cardinals and working down at Busch Stadium. I mean, what do you see with the Cardinals, and I'm sure going on with other teams, that these pitchers that aren't pitching in the game are still impacting the players on the field and just the general mindset of the team?
Well, yeah, pitchers don't, starting pitchers don't just throw every fifth day and then that's it. They have bullpen sessions a couple times a week, and all the starters go and watch each other's bullpens. They're bouncing ideas off of each other, trying to see what works, what doesn't work, what maybe they should be doing, how they should try to throw a different pitch. There's all of those things that they work together to try to help each other. The bullpen does the same thing. They're all out there throwing and stretching, and everybody's working together to try to make each other better. You see that all the time, and those guys are out there working. People think baseball players, oh, it's a 3-hour game and they make so much money. Those guys are at the ballpark 9 or 10 hours a day, every day. They're there, it's a 6 o'clock game. They're there at 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the weight room, working out, on the field, practicing things, doing things, working out, stretching out, doing all kinds of stuff, taking batting practice. These guys work hard and they work together, and it's a grind for these guys, honestly, everything that they go through each and every day. And it's impressive to be at the ballpark and be able to see how hard these guys work to master their craft. I mean, they put a lot of effort into it. It's not like they just wake up and go to the ballpark and it's 3 hours and they go home and that's their day. A lot of people don't realize how much work these guys put in.
Well, and we got to see that when we actually got to interview Kyle Gibson a few years ago, actually back in 2020 during the pandemic, and he was out locally pitching to high schoolers, just trying to keep himself, in shape for whatever season was to come. And you got to see that. They work on their craft so much, and it's the things that go on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't get a chance to see and understand. And by having those kinds of guys on the show, you get a little bit more of an understanding of what it takes to be a professional athlete. It's not about going out there making millions of dollars to play every 5 days. I mean, they do have pretty good contracts, but there is still more that goes into it than just going out there every 5th day and pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something Kyle Gibson still does, by the way, during his All-Star break every year. He lives in the St. Louis area, and he spends some time working with American Legion teams in the area. And somebody we know took batting practice off of him a couple of years ago, so that was pretty cool. And
I won't ask you what your average was for that one.
No. It was a fun experience, though. Although, not going to lie, Kyle's 6'7", so it's not the easiest thing in the world to try to hit a breaking ball when it starts over your head and then breaks right down the middle of the plate. But it was a fun experience, and he's a great guy, and he does a lot of stuff for people, kids, and people in general in the St. Louis area.
Now, we may have to get him back on if he's not an all-star this year, which I know that's a stretch right now, but he's pitched pretty well. So we'll see if that happens. Let's talk a little bit more about the rest of Major League Baseball, because obviously there's more than just the 2 teams in the league. And honestly, when you look at the standings and you look at how things have kind of gone this year, there haven't really been a ton of surprises as far as where teams are at right now. Yes, Blue Jays, Rays struggling in the American League East. The Mets are gonna Mets. I mean, they're just a disaster in New York. Arizona being 9.5 back in the NL West. But for me, I'm actually surprised a little bit about where the Reds are sitting at right now. I mean, they've got a lot of young talent. They kind of were one of those teams that you looked at and go, okay, this one is one that could be poised to make a bit of a run this year. And yet that right now they sit in last place in the NL Central. But as we saw with the Cardinals, all it takes is a good week or two and you're right back into it. But looking at where things are at right now, has anything stuck out as far as a surprise to you so far in this season?
There's a couple. I don't think anybody expected Toronto to be in last place in the American League East. That's a surprise. The Astros would be a surprise where they're at right now. The Rangers kind of just treading water. The World Series champion, all the money they spent, all the players that they brought in, not really working out. You look at a team like Arizona and San Francisco, both, who went out and were super aggressive, and they're just kind of treading water, barely, both of those teams. The Padres, again, go out and get a guy like Dylan Cease, just bring in another big name and it just doesn't work. They're playing 500 ball or a game over. They just can't seem to climb that hill. So those are teams that are really interesting to watch. I think it's going to make the trade deadline really, really interesting this year because you're going to have some teams that, do they drop salary? Does a team like Arizona, that went out, do they – I know he's having a horrible year, and I think you have to say, again, it's been proven that you need spring training. But does Arizona look to trade a guy like Jordan Montgomery at the trade deadline if they're still 9.5 or 10 games out at the trade deadline and kind of falling out of the wild card hunt? Is that something that possibly happens? Do the Padres look, if the Padres are barely in the wild card hunt, or if they fall out of the wild card hunt, would the Padres be willing to move a guy like Dylan Cease, who they traded for at the deadline? Would they be able to move? Would they move him? There's going to be a lot of pitching that's going to be really interesting to see. Where they go. Do the White Sox, who lost their 11th game in a row today and have been horrible this year, do guys like Michael Kopech and Luis Robert and those guys get moved? Do they make those kind of moves? So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff that could happen at the trade night. Even the Astros, do they start trading some of their young pitching? Because a lot of their team are free agents. Alex Bregman's a free agent at the end of the year. Kyle Tucker's going to need a big contract to stay. Do they start moving some of those guys? Verlander can't hold out forever. At some point you're going to have to kind of rebuild in Houston because he's, at some point his arm's going to fall off. The guy's going to be 50 before we know it. And he keeps going. But at some point the Astros are going to have to look and say, does Framber Valdez, do you move a guy like that if you're really struggling? So I think those are all really interesting things. And, I think a team like the Marlins, too, does a Jesus Luzardo, which a lot of people think is going to get moved. Do they move a guy like that? So I think there are going to be some really interesting things to watch. And the Mets, one other team. Does Pete Alonso get moved at the trade deadline if the Mets keep struggling? So I think it's going to be a really interesting July and August, first part of August around Major League Baseball to see what teams do.
Yeah, and the Cardinals are going to be right in the thick of it. Who would have thought that? I want to go back to what you were talking about with Jordan Montgomery. We were talking the other day about this through, just our text chain. This is something that we've seen over the last couple of years as well. And really, it's something that the Cardinals experienced a few years back as well, more so with the reliever than anything else. But, these guys that have held out in spring training and then are essentially signing at the beginning of the season and thrust right into the rotation with no spring training action. You're seeing it. They're struggling. The teams aren't getting exactly what they wanted from these pitchers. And yes, maybe by the second half of the season, things bounce back and they get to where they're at. But can a team afford to spend half of a season with a guy going through and essentially getting his spring training during the regular season? We're seeing this more consistently. Is this going to become a part of a bigger problem for Major League Baseball?
No, I don't think so, because I think teams are going to realize this. And, and a lot of teams did realize it. That's why there wasn't a big bidding war for these guys when it drug on as long as Scott Boras let it drag on, because teams saw what happened a few years ago when, players did this. Darvish and a couple of other pitchers tried this a few years ago, and then their season was a disaster because they had no spring training. And, we're seeing it again. And, of course, Jordan Montgomery fired Scott Boras right after he signed that contract with Arizona because he thought he was going to get a multi-year $100 million deal, and it didn't pan out. And, does Jordan Montgomery now live to regret that? Because does anybody, he's got an option with Arizona for next year, but does Arizona pick that up? And if they don't, does anybody else really make him spend big money for him after what he's done this year? Blake Snell kind of not quite as bad as Montgomery, but really not been the pitcher that San Francisco thought they were getting either. Although, there were a lot of questions about Snell going into the season because he'd won 2 Cy Youngs, but those were really the only 2 good years he'd had in the major leagues. He's been a on again, off again, 5-inning type pitcher. And, again, not having spring training doesn't help those things.
So here's the real question then. And this is something that we've talked about a couple of different times on this show. And it's not just with John Mozeliak. It was also with Doug Armstrong as well. Looking back, hindsight is 2020, obviously. You can never anticipate what's going to happen. But so much belly aching about signings and trades that did and did not happen. And then seeing the results of the guys that didn't come into this team. what does that say about the mindset of these general managers, especially here in St. Louis, to where, they're taking a lot of heat for what they're not doing. And then when things don't play out for those guys that don't come here the way they want it to, and now it almost looks like these GMs are geniuses. I mean, it's a crapshoot. Don't get me wrong. It's a lottery. I mean, that's really what it is. But is this why guys like Mozeliak and Armstrong continually escape the firing squad? Because when you look back on it, the decisions that they made to not move on some of these guys actually worked out in their favor.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves to rip John Mozeliak, and we've done our fair share of that on this show as well. But signing a starting pitcher, especially a starting pitcher, a free agent starting pitcher that's never been in your organization, to a big deal contract is a crapshoot. It really is. And you see 90% of the time those guys sign those big deals and they move to new teams and they get hurt and they don't live up to those deals. And so while we bellyached that, oh man, you should have gone and gotten this guy and you should have gone and gotten that guy, most of the time it's like, thank God we didn't do that. Remember a few years ago when the Cardinals, everybody thought David Price was coming to St. Louis,
Yep.
and he ended up going to Boston at the last second. How glad are we that David Price didn't end up coming to St. Louis, because he was never the same pitcher once he went to Boston. He had arm issues. His numbers were never, ever the same. He never lived up to the deal that he signed. And the Cardinals are like, thank God that didn't happen. Giancarlo Stanton, remember how mad everybody was when Stanton didn't come to the Cardinals? I mean, what would we do? What would the Cardinals be like right now if Stanton was on this team making the money that he's making in New York and not playing 80 games a year most of the time? I mean, we have really, really lucked out. And so, I mean, does it mean that you should never make those deals? No, because sometimes they do pay off. But, especially
Harper should have been a Cardinal. Sorry.
The only thing I'll say about that is, do you really want to sign? I mean, Bryce Harper looks good now, but he's still got, 9 years left on that deal? I mean, at some point, that deal's not going to look very good. I would have loved to have Bryce Harper for 4 or 5 years. Do I want Bryce Harper in the 19th year of his major league career making $30 million a year? Probably not. So
it's a hard thing though, because I mean, if you can get, I mean, I know they've only won one, but if you get 2 or 3 championships, or at least 3 or 4 championship appearances in that first 4 or 5, 6 years, I mean, that could be a little bit palatable. And the fact that Major League Baseball doesn't have the salary cap, I mean, it sucks that you would pay a guy $30 million in the later half of his career, but it's not as detrimental as, say the NHL or team or the leagues that have the salary cap.
Well, it is when you're St. Louis and you can't pay $300 million like Philadelphia can and like New York can, because you just don't make that kind of money. You're not in that major market. It does kill you. And, Philadelphia, this is Harper's 6th year. They haven't won a World. They got to one, but they haven't won anything yet. I mean, look at the Yankees. You can say, oh, the Yankees have Judge and they have Stanton and they've made the playoffs, but they haven't won anything. Look at the Dodgers. Look at all the money the Dodgers have spent. They've won the last decade. The Dodgers have had the highest payroll. Have they won anything? Yeah, the COVID year. That's the only year they've won anything. And there's no guarantees they're going to win this year, because the Dodgers, I mean, they don't look that great. When you look at it, Philadelphia looks like the best team. So, it's just, baseball is just a crapshoot. I mean, everybody pretty much anointed the Braves and the Dodgers to run away with the National League. And the Braves are going to be, Braves lost again today. So I think that if Philly wins tonight, the Braves will be 9 games behind Philadelphia.
Well, it doesn't help that your star player tore his other ACL and is out for the season, but that's notwithstanding, because they were struggling before that anyway. So it is. It's year in and year out. You just never know what's going to happen and who's going to be there. You just got to go out and play the games. All right. That's enough baseball talk for right now. Cardinals still leading 4-2 in the bottom half of the 5th inning at Philadelphia. Runner on, no outs for the Phillies there. We're going to step aside for another quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about the Battlehawks. I know here on this network, there's a lot of UFL talk, but we're going to dip our toes in there and see if we can sound halfway decent when it comes to talking about the UFL. We'll be right back here on Toasted Tavern. All righty, we're back, and let's talk about the ugliest game of football I think we've seen in a long, long time here, not just in the city of St. Louis, but on the positive side, that ugly game and that ugly win by the Battlehawks got us a playoff game for the first time at home in 20 years in St. Louis. How about that? It was a 13-12 Battlehawks victory over the San Antonio Brahmas yesterday on a missed field goal in the last seconds of the game. And again, you and I were talking before the start of the show, and man, oh man, was that the ugliest field goal attempt I think we've seen. And I know I've used the word ugly a lot here in the last minute and a half, but that's exactly what this game was.
Yeah, if you're a football fan, that wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. I mean, again, it was great because the Battlehawks won, and you clinched the conference championship next week, and the chance to host the league championship game in 2 weeks because it's in St. Louis. But yeah, you pretty much got gifted that game because they had two chances to win that game in the last minute and a half. As they had about three chances and a 2-point conversion to give them a 14-13 lead, and they couldn't complete that. And then, the Battlehawks get the ball back and go 3 plays and out and have to punt. And you get the ball back, and you have the Battlehawks had a couple of stupid penalties that moved the ball down the field, and you have a pretty makeable field goal that was about as ugly as if you and I tried to kick it because I was never a very good field goal kicker. Yeah, you won and you got to feel good about it, but it wasn't pretty. And part of that you can say, okay, AJ McCarron's coming back after missing a couple of weeks with the ankle injury and trying to get back into a groove. But yeah, it was not visually the best game in the world. If it's like the first Battlehawks game you've ever watched, you're probably like, I don't know about all this. But congratulations, they won and they're playing in the playoffs and they're hosting the playoff game. And St. Louis is hosting a conference championship again for the first time, like you said, in 20 some odd years. And let's go Battlehawks. Cause of the law, right?
That it is. And again, the St. Louis fans showed out again, over 34,000 in attendance for the game. And it's going to be interesting because, they're going to be going up against, another team here locally for fans on that day, which is this coming Saturday, June 9th. It's a 6 p.m. start down at the Dome at America Center. They're going to face off against the same team that they played this past week in San Antonio. That one was already set before coming into this week. So it really was about, the McCarron and them getting, back into shape and finding a way to come away with the victory and hosting. And as we said, it's the first time since, the Rams hosted the Panthers back in the day, 20 years ago, that this St. Louis is going to host a playoff game. And I know head coach Anthony Becht has already said it. He goes, everybody that lives in the city of St. Louis needs to be down at the Dome for this game. And it's very possible that you could see that. It's very possible you could see a completely packed Dome this week. And if they win the following week on the 16th, because if the Battlehawks make it to the championship game, that would be just incredible moments and a huge middle finger to the NFL, even if the standard of play isn't up to that NFL standard.
Well, and you wonder, there's a lot going on in St. Louis. Cardinals play at 3:15. How many people will get out of the ballpark about 6 o'clock and walk down the street to the Dome after they leave Busch Stadium on Saturday to watch that Battlehawks game? Yeah, it's going to be an exciting atmosphere. All the Battlehawks games have been amazing. The fans in St. Louis have proven that this is a sports, not just a baseball town. This is a sports town. It's a football town. The support the Battlehawks have gotten has been unbelievable. And, it still makes me sick to my stomach that we don't have an NFL team. And the fact that you just brought up that Panthers game makes me sick to my stomach because I
know.
See Steve Smith running past Jason Sehort as he tries to cover him. And, that game never should have gotten to that point because Marks wouldn't let Bulger throw the ball because he didn't trust him and you wouldn't put Kurt Warner in. And anyway, but yeah, that's history. It all went down and, anyway, yeah, hopefully the Battlehawks can win and bring a championship to St. Louis in the next couple of weeks. And we can have a Battlehawks celebration and Stan Kroenke can watch St. Louis celebrate and The Rock can celebrate. And who knows, maybe someday we'll see not just the UFL, but maybe an NFL team back in this city.
Yeah, that would be that'd be a very interesting scenario. It'd be one of the only times that a city's had 3 separate NFL teams. It'd be interesting. I want to go back. I know this is going to probably bring up bad memories, but Mark Bulger got a bad rap here in St. Louis. Did he? I think he did.
Mark Bulger was okay. He had his moments. Was he Kurt Warner? No.
Oh no one was.
No, there was only one Kurt Warner, and he stepped into a bad situation, that he shouldn't have been put into because Mike Martz was mad at Kurt or whatever and decided not to play him, and bad memories. And I don't know if you can see it over my shoulder, but there is a helmet sitting behind me that actually is the 2000 NFL Super Bowl championship helmet. That's actually autographed. Kurt Warner's autograph is actually at the top of that helmet, it's got the score and everything. But Mark Bulger had some good moments in St. Louis. He had some bad moments in St. Louis, and that Carolina game, the second half of that game was some of the bad moments Mark Bulger had because, like I said, he threw a couple of interceptions in that game, and then Martz got gun-shy to let him throw the ball, and game never should have gone to overtime. And then, like we said, Steve Smith, Jason Sehorn shouldn't have been in the secondary at that point, and Steve Smith blew past him, and Anyway, let's move past those words.
Well, a good memory then. Jacob Saylors set the Battlehawks single season rushing record with he had 50 yards in the game, ended up 461 past Brian Hill's 416 back in 2023. And yes, I know those are low numbers. Those are not NFL numbers, but still a very, very good accomplishment for a league and a team that's kind of been in and out the last couple of years. I mean, obviously with COVID and then switching from the XFL now to the UFL, being able to have some records is a really cool thing to see. And Saylors has been a really good running back for this Battlehawks team this year. Has taken that pressure off of AJ McCarron of having to throw the entire game. And that's something he didn't do all that well in the game on Saturday. 10 of 24 for 115 yards. Did throw his 15th touchdown pass of the year, but also threw an interception. So it's good to see a little bit of the balance of offense for this Battlehawks team. And you got to look at it and say this defense has been phenomenal. I mean, there was a stretch there just recently where they kind of let off the gas a little bit, but again, to kind of bend, not break, and only give up 12 points to the Brahmas in this game. And they've been like that all year where they've gone on a run of just shutting teams down.
Yeah, they have. Their defense has been phenomenal. They've done a great job, and hopefully that can continue for the next couple of weeks, and we can celebrate, and we can hear lots of cacaws going on in the city of St. Louis.
I mean, what's better than a championship parade in the middle of the summer? I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, the only other one that you would have would be hockey, and the Blues aren't in the playoffs. So, we got to have some sort of championship parade, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to be downtown for a Battlehawks parade. Be interesting to see how many people were. I'm sure a ton of people would be downtown for a Battlehawks Super Bowl parade or UFL parade. What do they call it? UFL championship? Is that what
I think it's the UFL championship. Yeah, because you got the XFL conference championship, you have the USFL conference championship, and then it'd be the UFL championship. And I mean, I don't think I've seen the trophy yet, but I don't know if it's all Super Bowl-esque nice, but it is silver, I believe. So, I mean, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. All right, we're going to take one more break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about St. Louis City SC. We'll dive a little bit into the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup potential final here in just a moment right here on Toasted Tavern. Alrighty, St. Louis City SC was down in Miami last night to take on Leo Messi and the Inter Miami squad, and they came away with a 3-3 draw. And, looking at that just on the wide angle view, you have to sit there and go, okay, that's pretty good. They took a tie on the road against one of the best teams in the MLS and going up against Messi and Suarez and Jordi Alba and all those guys down in Miami. That's a great result. But then you actually watch the game and you go, you had 3 leads. You had 7 scoring opportunities to expand your lead and really put Miami on the back foot and could not find a way to get it done. A bit of a disappointing 3-3 tie last night in Miami, but still a heck of a game to watch if you got a chance to watch it.
Yeah, like you said, you would have loved to have gotten that road win. That would have been huge, because it's Hasn't happened a whole lot for this team this year. So,
Zero.
that would have been right. I know. I was trying to be nice. I was trying to make it sound better than that. But again, you played Messi, who's been phenomenal since he got to Miami, and you played to a tie, which has been the theme of the city season this year is tie or loss, basically. Unfortunately, it's been one of those years where they just have not been able to get that big momentum and really take advantage of it and pull out wins this year like what they did last year. And it's been kind of tough as you're a fan. There's not been the excitement around this team that there was last year, just because they haven't played as well, honestly. And we've seen them play to a lot of draws, and it's just kind of the way the year is going.
Yeah, and they may have lost Rasmus Alm for a season-ending injury as well. It'd be the second season-ending injury for City as well. Gonna wait until we find out for sure if that's the case. But you lost two starters in this squad. You have at least another month until some of your new signings are able to come in as well. It's going to be a bit of a tough stretch for City, but like you said, tie has been the MO for this team, and all you got to do, if you can find ways to just collect points right now, keep yourself within striking distance. It's not like the league has separated themselves in the standings from City. If you're able to kind of weather the storm here a little bit and then get those new guys in, figure out your new form, and really steal some points late in the season, you have a chance to get in. And again, going in as a potential underdog, which is exactly what they were last year, being a brand new team, that might fit well with the City players' mindset. Just looking at the substitutions though that have been made as of late inning or late stages of games. You have to kind of question a little bit about what the strategy is there. We've seen a lot of late conceding of goals. There was one in stoppage time in the first half that was given up that ended up tying the game at 2 heading into halftime. So there's a lot of question marks around this team, and I'm just not sure if they know what the answer. But I've got faith in Lutz, and I've got faith in Carnell, and I got faith in this team. So it's going to be fun to see how this plays out, especially getting into the humid parts of the St. Louis weatherscape coming up here in mid to late June and early July for sure.
Well, and that could be a huge advantage for them because they train in it, they practice in it. They've kind of gotten used to it when other teams have to come in here and play in that heat and humidity that aren't exactly used to it. That could be a huge advantage as you get into the summer months for them. And like you said, you have to have faith in this organization and the coaching staff and the GM and everything because they've done an amazing job. Only their second year, they far exceeded expectations last year, and this year has been kind of, but you can say it's growing pains. It's an organization still trying to figure out exactly who they are and what they're going to do, and you just got to hang with them. And they're, like you said, they're staying in games. It's not like they're getting blown out or anything like that. They're being competitive, and they're right there. And so we'll just see how the rest of the season plays out.
Yeah, that we will. All right, let's touch on the NBA Finals. They are set. Dallas against Boston. Jason Tatum reaches his second Finals appearance, seeking his first title. Boston's 18th, and boy, oh boy, has Boston been good this year. 64 wins. They boast the most efficient offense in NBA history, and they've only lost twice in the playoffs, whereas the Mavericks have had to go through the 1, 3, and 4 seeds just to get here, and they've done that with a ailing Luka Doncic as well, a right knee sprain that he suffered midway through the first round of the playoffs. So a very interesting finals coming up. Celtics 9 games off between the end of the finals in the Eastern Conference and the start of the NBA Finals. Obviously, the Mavs are coming right off of their series, so it's going to be interesting. What do you see in this finals appearance for Boston and Dallas?
It's going to be a really good series. You've got a set of superstars for each team. Although, I still don't understand how some people in NBA circles question whether Jason Tatum is a superstar or not. Like you said, he's gotten the Celtics to 2 finals. He's been the leader of that team. He's been dynamic in his career, but some people just don't want to give him those props yet because he hasn't won a championship yet, which once he does that, I think there could be no question whether he's a superstar. And then you look at Dallas and, you've got Luka and you've got Kyrie, who's not the most loved player NBA fandom. Real quickly, talking about Luka, did you hear his comments the other day about how he's the best white player in the NBA right now? Which I'm like, I'm not sure I'd be saying that. There's some pretty good ones. There's one in Denver that's awfully good, And there's some others, but yeah, Luka said I'm the best white player there is in the NBA right now, and it's like I heard somebody say that Luka and Kyrie are the new Shaq and Kobe. It's like, wait, what? I don't. Let's not jump there yet. I'm not sure that one of them are 7 feet, and I'm not sure they've won 4 championships. So I don't know how you make that comparison.
Unless they were talking personality wise, arrogance level and things of that nature, I could see that being the case. Because obviously they don't have the rings or anything to match what Kobe and Shaq did. But if you're talking arrogance level and you're talking about that kind of stuff, yeah, I could see that being a potential duo in that sense, but not pound for pound on the court. No.
I do no, not at all. And Kyrie won a couple with LeBron, but Shaq and Kobe had a lot of championships to back up the arrogance that they had. Luka's good and Kyrie's good, but I don't know that either one of them are necessarily the best player at their position, even to say they're the best players in the league. So it's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be a real challenge. And they played Minnesota, and although that last game, it didn't look like the Timberwolves really wanted to be on the court. It looked like they thought they won a game in that series, and it was like, okay, we won a game. Our season's over. We're just kind of mailing it in tonight. So it's going to be really interesting because I think Boston's going to come out with something to prove, and I think it'll be fun to watch the Celtics fans boo Kyrie every time he touches the ball, as they do every time he goes back to Boston and steps on the court. So that'll be fun to watch.
Oh, it certainly will. Well, as we're getting near the end of the show, we'll talk a little bit next week about the potential of what the 9 days of rest could have done to the Celtics. We'll see. Obviously, a couple of games in that series will have already been completed. We'll see if there's any detriment to them sitting, because we see it a lot in sports where if a team sits for a little, they're a little sluggish coming out. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll have a Stanley Cup final set by the time we get back with you next week. The Florida Panthers have already advanced. They won Game 6 last night, 2-1 over the New York Rangers. Vladimir Tarasenko had the game-winning goal in that one for the Panthers, so he has a chance at a second Stanley Cup. And Edmonton is on the verge of getting a Canadian team back to the Stanley Cup Finals as they lead 2-0 over the Dallas Stars. After one, they lead that series 3-2. Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, 24 and 21 points respectively in the playoffs so far. And looking at that, Connor McDavid has a goal and an assist tonight, and Draisaitl has an assist as well. So they just continue to add to their point totals. It seems like it's almost inevitable that Edmonton will win a Stanley Cup with those two there, but the Panthers are pretty darn good as well. So it should be a very, very interesting Stanley Cup final, regardless of how it plays out. Final minute or so of the show, Scott. Awesome to be back. Awesome to be part of the Fuel Sports Network. Final thoughts before we head out tonight.
Yeah, man, it's good to be back doing this. I'm really excited to be with Fuel Sports and to grow with them and see how this all plays out. I think it's going to be great for all of us, and it's always good to be back with you, Wags. It's been too long.
Oh, it has. We've all been incredibly busy. I mean, I've got my St. Charles FC soccer squad on my TV to the left as they're up in Chicago City playing Chicago City SC in a USL League 2 matchup. Been dealing with that, as well as the USLW League squad. My job at Lindenwood, calling games. I'm going to be over in Belleville on Friday night calling an ATAR soccer game. So plenty of stuff going on for both of us. What do you got coming up here in the next couple weeks?
Just busy time at the ballpark for me. I'll be at Busch Stadium pretty much nonstop for the next couple of weeks doing stuff. And then I'm going to be doing some baseball stuff. I'm going to be doing a little bit of American Legion baseball and some select high school baseball stuff, and maybe doing some junior college stuff as well. So we'll see how that goes the next couple of months there too.
Awesome. Well, that's Scott Tobben. I'm Michael Wagenknecht. Thank you for joining us tonight here on the Toasted Tavern. Make sure you come back next Sunday and every Sunday. Pull up a stool, grab a beverage, and join us here in the Tavern Sundays from 7 to 8.